Mark Davis Show on News Talk 820 WBAP.
Hey there! Don't look now, but it's showtime. About 6 after the hour, and greetings once again from the logic-free zone of Washington, D.C. Brian Wilson's the name. Talk Radio's the game. We're in for Mark Davis all this week. Mark will be back, I'm assuming, on Monday. Actually, he'll be back tomorrow, but in a different time slot, filling in for Sean Hannity. So we have about 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes here to play with all sorts of expensive electronic equipment and cause as much internal and structural damage as possible. With your help, of course, 787-1820, the same phone number as Mark uses when he's here, 800-288-WBAP, toll-free from anywhere in the known universe, and unknown universe for that matter, and quite frankly, we haven't heard much from the unknown portion, so feel free to dial in anytime. AT&T Wireless Phones, #820. We had quite a conversation yesterday about proposed legislation in Texas. Bills apparently already in the hopper for the upcoming session that will limit, if not prohibit or regulate or otherwise fatitzel around with how you speak on your cell phone whilst behind the wheel of your 4, 8, 16, or 18-wheel vehicle. I wonder if those restrictions would apply to people talking on cell phones on motorcycles. Yeah, well, anyway, I'm sure they'll weasel word it one way or the other. Anyway, I've got another angle on that we can talk about here in a couple of minutes. But of course, the big news, the big news this morning is the continuing concern for flood victims over around India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and all that neck of the woods as a result of that tsunami and earthquake and all the rest of the other days. Big story, big death toll. When we were talking the other day, it was estimated to be around 20,000 when we started. It was 24,000 by the time we got off the air, and now they're looking at 40, 45, 50, 60,000. They really have no clue as more bodies are discovered, and some never will be as they got washed away and all the rest of that. And of course, immediately, it was right at the end of the show yesterday that we got word from United Nations. That some dude, Jan Egeland from Norway, who holds the lofty title of Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, said the United States was being stingy in the millions of bucks that we coughed up right at the get-go. It was like $20 million. Boom, right out of the box. That's stingy. He said that was stingy. Well, apparently he got then there was another $15 million that got added on top of that right away, and so on. So about $35 million, which was more than anybody else was putting up. And here's this Jan Egeland dude saying that we're stingy. Well, yeah, apparently he got an awful lot of heat for that, and now there's articles in the New York papers stating that he now claims he was misinterpreted. I love that. These guys are always being misinterpreted. They speak in perfectly decent English. You people are stingy. And they say, what? No, I was misinterpreted. And actually, the exact quote was, it is beyond me why we are so stingy, really. But nevertheless, Secretary of State Colin Powell pointed out immediately the United States has given more aid in the last 4 years than any other nation or combination of nations in the world, and so on. And then went right on to point out the exact figures. It probably would have been more effective if Secretary Powell had suggested that if England was searching for some serious money, he might want to pass the plate among his fellow dudes and dudettes over at the UN, since they all, at least the big shots, raked in a pretty fair hunk of change in that Oil for Food program, or Oil for Palaces program, as we've come to know it. They probably have some serious dollars loitering around over there. But be that as it may, I thought maybe we'd take a little bit different look at that this morning, since all over the country we have stories of people getting up bucks to help these folks out. As a matter of fact, yesterday we were speaking with Rich Galen from Mullings.com. We were having an interesting conversation, and he had to break off a phone call right around the top of the hour news, 11 o'clock yesterday morning, to take a call from Dr. K.A. Paul, who runs an outfit known as the Global Peace Initiative out of Houston. And Rich was working with Dr. Paul during that newscast, that 6 or 8 minutes that we had there, trying to come up with fuel for an airlift airplane basically Dr. Paul had, was trying to get medicine and food and clothing and things like that over to the that area where the tsunami did its worst. So this is what's going on all around the place, and that's why I thought we'd take a slightly different look at this whole aid thing. Got an email from a Dr. Michael Clifford, who suggested that now that you've got this UN Undersecretary for Humanitarian Aid criticizing the U.S. for only giving $15 million, $25 million, $30 million to the effort to help those affected by the quake, and that Colin Powell announced, actually, that original announcement by Colin Powell was that each of the affected countries would immediately receive $100,000. And as the good doctor points out, that was one of the smallest amounts of money I ever heard mentioned in the same sentence with the words United States. I mean, this is less than a loaded Hummer, $100,000. But then I remembered the old Davy Crockett story about Congressman Davy voting for aid to the victim of a Washington, D.C. fires and dramatically discovering in kind of an epiphany later on through one of his constituents that it wasn't his money to give. And I was just wondering, what do you think? This would be a great time for President Bush to announce that he could not give anything from the country, because as the country itself has no legitimate authority to dispense monies for those kind of purposes. I know it's a pesky reference, but if you go back to the Constitution, as Davy Crockett did as a congressman, come to find out that we just don't have that. There's no authority in there for that. There's no authority for the Congress or the president or anything from a constitutional basis to go writing checks out of the public treasury to hand out to other people, regardless of where they are or regardless of how devastated they've been or what the tragedy is. However, regardless of the fact that the president and the Congress does not have the constitutional authority to dispense monies for these kinds of purposes, I bet if the president then went on TV and asked the American people to do what they could, the folks in Sri Lanka and Sumatra and all those places would see the real spirit of American generosity. See, what happens is that in situations like this, that we all become kind of dependent on the government, because the first reaction among most Americans is when you hear the horror experienced by those who survived the events. I mean, just imagine a wall of water 30, 40, 50 feet high coming at you and so on. You survived that event, and you hear about things that you try to imagine being in that situation. What do you want to do? You want to help out, right? What can I do? I mean, say I got some clothes here, got some cash, got some, got some food. I mean, whatever. Got some sleeping bags here that I haven't used in a few years. What can I do to help? We all say that. It's how we do here. It's what Americans do. Then you hear, the government's going to do it. The government's going to send 20 million. The government's going to send 35 million. The government's got airplanes and stuff and all the rest of that. Oh, great. Well, that means I already gave on April the 15th, right? And I sent in some thousands of dollars, and there you have it. My obligation, is done. I already gave. Thank you. I already gave to the government. And the government takes the money and then does all this charitable stuff on my behalf. Is that the way it works? So I got to looking around. I found, for example, a quote from Jim Madison. You remember Jim. He kind of had a hand in being around the Constitution when it was written and all that founding father stuff. Charity is no part of the legislative duty of the government. Of course, what is he? James Madison, come on, just a dead white guy, of course, that was back then. We have a living constitution, don't we? I mean, things changed, right? They didn't have tsunamis back in 1776. They didn't have tragedies. They didn't have children, women, and so on, elderly dying through natural or man-made disasters back then, did? Of course not. Of course not. That Georgetown fire that Davy Crockett voted $20,000 to give the victims and so on, spit in the ocean. But if we're giving, 20 million or 35 million to these folks, I mean, why stop there? Why not 50 million, 75 million, 100 million? How about $1 billion? Let's just round it off to a nice big figure. What do you think? And then all these folks that are bending over backwards to provide aid and so on from the private sector can go back to watching Oprah and Jeopardy and The Price is Right and Survivor 12 and so on. 787-1820, the phone number if you'd like to chime in. 800-288-WBAP toll-free. AT&T wireless phoners can hit pound sign 820, or you can write me insulting missives to Brian Wilson at brianwilson.net. James Bovard going to be our special guest in about 45 minutes. We'll be yapping with him about some of the work he's been doing here lately. He's the author of Lost Rights, Freedom in Chains, Feeling Your Pain, Tyranny and Terrorism and Tyranny, The Bush Betrayal, and so on. There's a lot of great stuff out from Jim, and he'll be in to yap with us about the top of the hour. Your turn right now. Brian Wilson in for Mark Davis here at News Talk 820 WBAP. Funky music now. All right, here we are, back in action. News Talk 820 WBAP. Brian Wilson up here in the logic-free zone where your tax dollars go to die. Good to have you aboard. 787-1820 is the phone number. And speaking of phone numbers, why don't we hop to it? See who wants to dive in first. The ankle-deep waters of today's discussions. Let's go to Fort Worth. Dan is first up on the radio. Hey, Dan.
Good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm reasonable. How about you?
Semi-reasonable.
Semi-reasonable. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on this gentleman from the UN's assessment of the United States and relate it to my own experiences during a disaster of similar magnitude back in 1970 when an earthquake hit Peru. And I recall the death toll was somewhere around 50,000.
Okay.
And I was assigned to Marine Medium Helicopter 365. We were aboard the USS Guam, and that's a helicopter and troop carrier, and we actually happened to be on Liberty in San Juan, Puerto Rico at the time.
They sent you down there?
Pardon?
And they sent you down there?
Yes, we were immediately recalled to the ship. We left San Juan that afternoon, went down to the Caribbean side of the Panama Canal, offloaded our infantry troops, went through the canal, one of the largest ships to ever make that passage. And on the Pacific side, we spent a day and a half working 24/7, loading every cubic inch of that ship with supplies. And we picked up medical and relief teams and then sailed nonstop down the west coast of South America and spent 2.5 weeks near the sites of the worst damage flying relief and rescue operations. By the time we got there, starvation and disease had started to be a huge factor. I was on the first lift off the ship into the city with supplies, and we landed in a soccer field, and the crowd surrounding the soccer field tore down the chain link fence, and we basically kicked everything out the door and took off.
Yeah, that was all part of, I think I recall that. That was called Operation Stingy, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I think I recall that.
And I remember the thousands and thousands of UN troops and planes that, no, wait a minute, they were all U.S., sorry.
Ah, yeah, well, yeah, sometimes that shade of blue is a little difficult to discern at a distance.
Yes.
Yes.
But, during the entire time we were involved in this, every single ship and every single aircraft I saw was a United States Navy ship or plane. And I didn't see any British Navy. I didn't see any Chinese or Soviet Navy.
Well, they're so far away, you know.
It's a long way, that's true.
It's a long way to travel, you know. It's tough enough getting your ship through the canal. I mean, come on.
Exactly. Of course, they didn't have that option. They had to come straight across the Pacific. But,
you know, I think this makes a really good case, you know, and we haven't heard this much lately. I remember when I was, I've mentioned this on the air a couple of times, I'm a graduate of Louisiana State University, a fine party institution over in Baton Rouge that occasionally sojourns to Texas and embarrasses itself from time to time. But I remember in the 15 years that I lived in Baton Rouge, traveling around, and you used to see these signs every once in a while. Get the U.S. out of the UN. Of course, this is a few years back, and I wasn't a political animal at the time. I certainly wasn't a talk show host, and I was trying to figure out what the significance of that was. And I was damn near prophetic. I mean, it's amazing how more of those billboards haven't popped up here over the past few years.
Yes, I remember seeing those and never really understanding it until the last couple of years, and I've come to understand the UN a heck of a lot better. It's
all becoming clear to me now. Dan, thanks a lot for your efforts down there and your service to the country, and appreciate the call. Thanks. Have a great New Year. Appreciate chatting with you. See, that's the thing. You know, that's what we do. We do things. We do things, and I suppose the constitutional aspect of it all is an interesting discussion, but unfortunately. and too many times, and there's a good and bad to this. Our feelings, like Morris Albert's song, kind of overwhelm us, and the emotions come to the forefront, and the objective thought and analysis goes to the back of the bus, and here we are. Moving right along, we got a news update, by the way. Speaking of the news, that's coming up here in a moment. We'll talk to Gordon as soon as we get back, and your calls at 787-1820. Brian Wilson in for Mark Davis. Good to have you aboard here Wednesday, News Talk 820 WBAP. All right, Amy, here we go. Brian Wilson in for Mark Davis. Mark's going to be heading up to Gotham tomorrow, if he isn't there already, to fill in for Sean Hannity on his national show, dispensing Texas wisdom from coast to coast and border to border. Should be exciting. Let's see here. We, of course, have today and Thursday and Friday in our Rush to New Year's, 9th annual Rush to New Year's tour here, as we have the privilege and pleasure of filling in for Mark. Think about that. That was something about Jerry Orbach, wasn't it? I saw him in 42nd Street up on Broadway. I was working up in New York City, and I remember sitting in the audience. He came out, 42nd Street had such great music. Come in, those dancing feet on the avenue, all that stuff. Anyway, I remember sitting there in the audience, had great seats, looking up, and here comes Jerry Orbach out on the stage and say, what is he doing here? What is he doing in this show? Because I had seen him in, it was kind of a heavy, in different TV shows. I did not see him in the Fantastics. That was a little bit before I became excited about Broadway shows, although that's a great show, the longest running show ever in Manhattan. Anyway, he's dead. If you're a Law & Order fan, Jerry Orbach, the detective on Law & Order, dead at the age of 69 with prostate cancer. And that's kind of bad. Prostate cancer is something that can be avoided if you go in for that little exam, fellas. Anyway, let's get back to it here. James Bovard joining us at the top of the hour. You can join us anytime, 787-1820, 800-288-WBAP, that's 9227 in numerical terminology, AT&T Wireless Tuners, #820, and we'll have some cell phone usage news coming up soon, but not now. Right now, we're going to Colleyville, which is lovely this time of year. Dan is on his wireless phone. Hello, Dan.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, relative to the aid for the disaster relief in Asia.
Yes.
Bush came out a couple of years ago with $1 billion program to fight AIDS in Africa, and it seems to me that that money would be better spent if we could keep the folks in Africa to keep their pants on and use some of that money for disaster relief in Asia.
Yeah, that's. I think it would be a great idea to go along with yours. How about if we take all the money that we send to the United Nations, which is 20% of its budget, and just divert that?
Well, you got to remember we're way behind on paying our assessments to the UN going back several years. So we get billed for it, but I don't think in the last several years we've been paying.
I kind of think that once George II was elected, I think that there was a sneaky little vote to go ahead and go ahead and pay that off. I could be wrong on that. I'll double check on that. But nevertheless, I think if we take the money that we've been sending to the United Nations and send that to these different countries, I think that would be money much better spent than sending it down the rat hole up there at Turtle Bay in New York City.
The AIDS relief program was not a UN program. That was something that Bush. No,
I understand. That was like $10 billion that they were sending over to Africa for AIDS relief.
Half of that will go into the pockets of corrupt African officials.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there have been studies upon studies upon studies, especially over in Africa and the Middle East and so on, where but Africa is particularly poignant in the fact that so many people are driving Mercedes-Benz over there. They got Mercedes-Benz dealerships where they don't have roads. as a result of this various relief money that's been sent. Oh, this has been going on for years. This isn't just a result of that Bush relief program that started a couple of 3 years ago. But I agree. I mean, as far as the money, at least half the money going into the pockets of various leaders and being squandered there, along with the money that we're sending in as far as our dues or support or whatever the United Nations. Plus, I think that I read this morning that France has ponied up for the relief effort $186,000.
Well, again, so, I'm a Bush supporter, but Bush did that African AIDS program for political reasons, and he needs to be careful on how he spends our money. And that was a political effort, and he needs to come out and we need to use the money that we're so generous with, and we need to spend the money that we provide to the world a lot more judiciously than what we have been in the past.
Well, I don't disagree with that, Dan. I appreciate the call. In fact, the whole business of foreign aid and all the rest, I think, is a subject that deserves much more scrutiny and discussion than it gets. On the basis of how much do we send and to whom and for what and why, other than support on the international stage for various other issues. The amount of money that we send to places that hate us, that's of course, that in and of itself is a rather astounding little revelation that a lot of people aren't aware of either, that we got an awful lot of money going to folks who don't think very highly of us and don't support us in just about any other area. But if we cut our foreign aid to them, well, everybody howls like crazy that we're mean and stingy and so on.
Until we put more emphasis on how the money's used than how much money we send over, we'll always be throwing money down a rat hole.
Well, I'll drink to that.
I doubt that that's going to change anytime in our lifetime.
I suspect not. And I think the only way to accomplish that is to elect people who are inoculated against what happens to them once they come inside the logic-free zone. Even the most, except for people like Ron Paul and folks, they're the only ones that seem to be immune to that kind of nonsensical thinking. Dan, thanks a lot for the call. Enjoyed the chat. Happy New Year. Got to take a break. Back in a moment. 787-1820, the number. Brian Wilson's the name. In for Mark Davis here, News Talk 820 WBAP.
Time to filling in for Mark Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Hey, sorry, there's a little musical joke going on between our producer, Randy Williams, and myself here. Just checking out the Oxford English Dictionary has added some new slang words to the 2005 dictionary. I know you'll be rushing out immediately to get your copy. Here are some of the new additions. Hummer. That's the vehicle. I don't know if they'll have any other secondary or tertiary meanings. Benjamin, now defined as a $100 bill, slang term for a $100 bill. Hacky sack. That's been around for a while. My kids used to do that. That little thing with the foot in the bag and all. Supersize. No explanation required there. Jihadist. Slang term for a fighter. I suppose there could be a number of other adjectives that would go into that. His honor, Hizzoner, as in the mayor. And for you computer geeks, kill file, both as two words and one. Kill file as where bad ideas go to die on your computer. Anyway, that's the latest from the Oxford English Dictionary. Let's mosey on over to Plano and see what's blowing Rusty's skirt up. Hey, Rusty, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing today, Brian?
I'm reasonable. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm reasonable. I was
Good.
along listening this morning, and I was curious about your last statement, where we vote for a president and he doesn't come to the logic-free zone and freak out on us. Just how do we do that?
I have no clue. As a matter of fact, I will borrow a thought from my friend Walter Williams, who will be with us Friday morning. He said once upon a time, it may have been right here on WBAP because we've done a ton of shows together, but I remember him saying that if any of the founding dads, like Tom Jefferson or George Washington or Samuel Adams, any of those people ever came back to life and ran for office on the same platform that they were elected way back when, they'd probably run out of town on a rail. Because today's politicians largely get elected on the basis of what they're going to do for you, how they're going to open the coffers, how they're going to pass laws, how they're going to create regulations and so on, to care and feed and otherwise soothe the ruffled feathers of various special interest groups, or just special interests. You don't have to be a member of a group, whether it's prescription drugs for senior citizens or various financial relief or tax cuts or whatever. Invariably, the deal is always something to do with using the power of the office to provide dollars for somebody. Steel tariffs for the United Steelworkers Union. I'm sure they were very happy about that. That huge ag bill that was passed for ranchers and farmers all around the country. I'm sure they were very happy about that. The aid to education bill that Teddy Kennedy wrote, the Leave No Child Behind debacle. All those things are more designed to gain votes than to do nice things or good things or constitutional things for the people in the country. So this is the basis upon which these people get elected, and I don't know that we'll necessarily get somebody that'll stand up and say, if you elect me and send me to Washington, I guarantee you that, like we were discussing earlier about Davy Crockett, I will not vote any dollars from the Treasury to come back here in some form of aid. I can't imagine that guy getting an awful lot of votes. Can you?
No, I really can't. And
No.
It's sad that the country is so fragmented that more people can't really take a look at a candidate and figure it out beforehand. Of course, we don't get many choices.
Well, yeah, because they're all just basically appealing or attempting to appeal to a different side of the aisle. There are those people, for example, that are business people, entrepreneurs, and so on, that are concerned about taxes, and then there are people on the other side of the aisle that look for government largesse in the form of free drugs, free money, free food, free housing, subsidized help in various and sundry, and they go that way. It's a really rather astounding tug of war as to exactly how that all comes down. You may be interested in a little piece, a little quote from a column by Bruce Fine that I came across in the wee small hours of this morning. He says, ask yourself, could any living politician with unlimited time compose anything comparable to President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address? And as regards character, no politician for generations has come within light years of a George Washington. Children are taught complacency with mediocrity and jealousy of genius. Standards of achievements plunge to avoid psychological distress to the indolent. Moral distractions among civilizations or religions are discouraged. To suggest the superiority of Beethoven over Britney Spears or Rembrandt over Jackson Pollock is to invite an indictment for cultural snobbery. If the United States continues to disdain and abandon the ideals and customs of its birth, then its death, like the Roman Empire, is simply a matter of time. Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I like that, and I agree with that. And it's really, my theory is a simple one. I listen to a lot of talk radio, conservative radio. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good people out there. I really believe that they should band together and pick some causes and try to get some things done. I don't know, but...
Well, there are some folks that are working in that direction. The Representative Hayworth out of Arizona, Representative Paul out of Texas. There are several, and there are people who are working to get people like that elected. JD, for example, was well, I can't say that now. I don't recall whether he actually got any assistance from that. But Stephen Moore is going to be with us tomorrow. He's the head of the Club for Growth, which kind of like a conservative libertarian alternative to Emily's List, where they try to find rhinos, Republicans in name only, and try to support individuals who are running for office on the ideals of limited government, lower taxes, less government regulation and involvement, greater individual responsibility, and so on, the essential ideals of the founding dads. And there are a few out there, but I think it's going to take a long time. I've used the example of, I don't know, if you tie up a boat to a dock, on a lake, and you untie it, the boat just doesn't zip right out to the middle of the lake. It's just gradual incremental drifting. And that's pretty much the way we've drifted away from the ideals of the founding fathers and our founding documents like the Declaration of the Constitution and so on, the Bill of Rights. It's taken place over literally a couple of 100 years. It's been a little bit more expedient over the last 75 or so, 50, 100, but we're not going to get back to where we ought to be overnight. But so it's going to be a long-term process. I don't know whether or not we've got enough horsepower to pull it off.
Well, the last 5 or 10 years have been just unbelievable. The assault on Christmas and everything else this year, the ACLU. I mean, where's our conservative or Christian organization to fight everything the ACLU does.
Well, that's an interesting you bring that up. I don't know about you, but because as a talk show host, you got to read an awful lot of stuff, and I'm on the air all around the country in different cities and so on, San Francisco and Fort Worth, Dallas, and Baltimore and Washington, New York, Kansas City, and so on. And what I found in looking around is that this was the first year. This is the first year where I actually saw schools and communities and politicians, not necessarily national politicians, local politicians, actually standing up and telling organizations like the ACLU and various special interest groups, blow it out your shorts. We're going to do this anyway. We're gonna sing Christmas carols that that have the word God in it. We're gonna put up creches. We're gonna say Merry Christmas and not this kind of neutered Happy Holidays business. We're gonna do that. And if you don't like it, well, give it a week or two. They'll all come down and we'll start saying Happy New Year and looking forward to the Super Bowl.
I like that. I'm from Plano, and
yeah, we heard a lot about Plano.
Now, and you look up and find out what's going on in the schools. It's sick.
Well, and Plano deserves a pat on the back. I think that there was some rather dunderheaded thinking, or what passed for thinking, going on over there, and the folks stood up, and I think they deserve to be commended. It was a real blow for Merry Christmas. I'm sure Santa was very happy.
Well, there were some good things that came out of this Christmas. Some fighting back, it really did help.
Well, maybe it'll be a trend. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. Rusty, I got to scoot. Thanks a lot for the call. Happy New Year. We'll be back in a moment here with more yapping. James Bovard at the top of the hour. Brian Wilson with you here for Mark at 787-1820. News Talk 820 WBAP.
Remember, you're listening to Brian Wilson, filling in for Mark Davis on News Talk 820 WBAP.
And doing the best we can. Feel free to join us. 288 WBAP is our toll-free number. By the way, if you're like our previous caller from Plano and you'd be interested in some organizations that are working diligently to find clear-thinking, constitutionally-based individuals to elect to Congress, you can check out clubforgrowth.com, where Stephen Moore hangs out. He'll be with us tomorrow. Or you might want to go to citizenoutreach.com. That's Chuck Muth's organization, where you can also read the story of Davy Crockett's epiphany right there on the website. Citizenoutreach.com and clubforgrowth.com, two excellent websites with great information. In Dallas, Andrew joins us next on the telephone. Welcome to WBAP. Andrew, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for taking my call.
You betcha.
Appreciate it. I just wanted to go back to you were discussing with a caller about the UN.
Yeah.
And, I just got back from England and visiting my parents. We went out one night and some other friends and, just talking politics and what's going on in the States and concerns over the Iraq War and, whatever else. And brought up the issue with the UN and the scandal, the ongoing scandal. They had I'm dead serious. They had no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah, there's that's a great point. I'm hoping that before the week is up, we're going to be able to give a little time to the oil for food scandal that has engulfed the United Nations and has gotten scant publicity, so that just about even people in this country don't really know what's going on. We'll check it out. James Bovard, appreciate the call. Got to run. James Bovard's next after the news with me here on News Talk 820 WBAP.